And so that's what I needed, my water. Oh, okay. My mother called, threw me off. Oh, and let me stop because one of my goals is to put the whole thing out there uncut. So
Oh, okay.
everybody knows my mother called all the time. So anyway, well, I want to thank you for joining us. Um, as you know, this is going to be a unique election this year. And so I just want to dive right on in. Let me look at my notes. And at the same time, okay, well, let's start with the easiest question first. Don't you think you're a little too thin for this job?
Yeah. I mean, that's obviously the number one concern that we had going in. You know, being young, being inexperienced. But there's
I said
something.
thin. I said thin. Don't get me in trouble.
No worries, no worries. And it's okay. It's what we've heard throughout the entire election, and I knew that going in,
Mhm.
and I was okay with that, because my passion trumps anything else that could really get in the way. And at the end of the day, Brentwood hasn't had something new, something different in over a decade, or well over a decade.
Mhm.
And so I'm simply offering voters something different, something new, a fresh perspective. I'm very open-minded. There's no closed-minded tendencies or any sort of preconceived notions. I'm coming as a blank slate, and if voters want something like that, and I think they do, then we'll see how the election turns out. But yeah, absolutely, I understand. But I didn't do it. I didn't do it out of. At the same time, I knew what I was doing. I'd been in the city. I knew the issues. I wasn't going in blind. Um, I was going in experienced and ready. Um, but with that being said, still offering that fresh perspective.
Okay. No, and that's fair enough.
Yeah.
And before I even dive into the questions that the folks sent me, yesterday I was doing some research, not on you, but just the city in general.
Sure.
And I found a link in the Brentwood Express, I think it was, our local newspaper. And it happened to show a brand new big development plan on the north side of Sand Creek. And yeah, Sand Creek. And
Do you know what the name of that plan was?
um, I could look it up because it kind of threw me. Let's see if this old guy can actually do two things at the same time as I'm talking with you.
No worries if you can't. I might be able to
Okay.
identify it from what you
Oh, no,
say.
no, no. That no. It because what surprised me about it was, the fact that I had not heard anything about this. Now, there's no reason for me to hear anything about it, to be honest, but it still kind of threw me for a loop. And is this it right here? No, that's the web online. Ah, here it is. It's pulling up right now.
Sure.
So, Scaratino Ranch, Sand Creek and Highway 4.
Okay.
And they're putting, or the plan calls for up to 20,000 square feet of retail space, which I believe would be across the across the street from Sand Creek and Brentwood. I'm trying to get my bearings here right now. It looks like it's going to be on the northeast corner. Yeah, because across kitty corner from the proposed area is McDonald's. Now, I know that growth is a big thing. Yeah, is a big thing. I won't say who
It is.
thing is for, but the question is, I happen to find it on the back page as I was looking for something else, and the question is, did I or we miss something? And if we didn't miss it, then why does it seem like it was meant to be on the back page?
Sure. So I'm not particularly familiar with exactly what you're talking about, either because I'm not sure exactly where it is.
Dude, I
But
saw it
that's,
yesterday. So
yeah, sure, sure. And if you want to send it to me, I'm more than willing to look into it. But there's a few things. So there's a few things that could be going on. One, this could have been a project approved years ago, several years ago. And that's what you're seeing now is some of the projects, and people are getting frustrated about it. And I understand why, is projects going up and more houses being built. When in reality, some of these projects were passed or were approved in 2008 or even before that. And now the developers are just beginning to build. And so unfortunately, the city has no control over that. They can't do anything. The contract's been signed. It was approved back when we were ready to grow. And unfortunately, we've grown, and now these projects, which were passed prior to 2010, are coming back kind of to bite us in the butt. But you know, if it's a retail center, if it's a shopping center, you know, I think that's an advantageous opportunity for Brentwood, you know, to bring more money, more jobs. And so, and I understand we are a high wage earning community. We have a higher wage income than Walnut Creek, and so those are the type of jobs we want to attract. But at the same time, you know, retail is valuable too, and I think we're lacking that in some areas. And so the second thing is either it could be very early in development. It could be the opposite. I'm not quite sure. Once again, I'm not quite sure about the project, but it could just be in its early stages. If it might be the project I am thinking about, and that is that it's in its early development and the city is just starting to look into it. And so that's why oftentimes you see these at the back pages, because it's just not, it's not big news when there's not much plans around it. You know, you take Bridlegate, for example, that was on the front page when it started to get out there, because it was a big deal, and it was a plan that had been involved and established, and now it needed to be voted on. So I don't think it shouldn't be pushed to the back page, but oftentimes that's kind of the two things. Either it's been approved or it's very early and really not enough to sort of make a decision on it.
okay,
If that makes sense.
No, that makes absolute sense. And I apologize in advance. Some of these questions you may not know the answer to, and I think we all expect that.
Yeah, no worries. No worries. I like just having a discussion. I enjoy it.
And that's why we're doing this.
Yeah.
But with that in mind, let's talk about the older plans that are, for whatever reason, they were approved years ago, and for whatever reason they stalled, but now they're coming forward. And the reason I asked that question is I was driving down Scaratino heading towards Guerin.
Okay.
And I saw some brand new homes on the northeast side of Brentwood Boulevard.
Okay.
Then I see this, I see this, you know, big build out of, for lack of a better term, industrial stuff, business related things. So if I was buying a home, you know, in an area where I thought it was going to be luscious and spacious, and then all of a sudden I'm getting a Denny's right next to me, I would be surprised. And yeah, okay, it was approved years ago. I have a problem with there's nothing we can do about it now part. And again, maybe there isn't anything we can do about it now. So my question to you is, when you become mayor, and I say that to all the candidates, I'm going to be right with one of you. So I will go with you. When you become mayor, will you be able to look into these things and rethink what was the initial plan? Because we have changed. We have changed dramatically, certainly from 2009 till today. We have changed dramatically from 2015 to today. And I don't know, and you don't know, and that's fair, when these projects were stalled. But I would think we should relook at this now, because you have a gang of homes, and they're going to go, you know, for $500,000 plus.
Sure.
And now I'm going to have a Denny's, and in addition to that, some soon to be fill in the blank industrial,
sure.
Or enterprise.
So it all sort of depends, right? if a plan was fully approved, completely, just it was passed, years ago, there is simply the city can simply do nothing. That would open us up to a major lawsuit, and I'm not talking about something that the city can afford. It would be a lawsuit upon lawsuit if we were to continue to do it. So there are certain legal ramifications for projects that have been passed with years and years ago. Where we change is if some of the projects are still in motion, or so. Bridlegate, for example, had gone through the process, but it hadn't finished, and now it's just starting to finish now. And so there's kind of that difference that you have to understand. There's one where there's things have been passed, and I think what the city has to do is be transparent and say, this is what's going to happen in the next couple of years. Be prepared for it, but the city has to understand, and what they need to make the residents know or educate is that we are no longer focused on that. We are ready to prioritize business, to prioritize a different avenue than we have for the past 20 years. And so, and the city hasn't done this, is just put everything up front. This is what's going to happen. This is what can potentially happen. But going forward, we're no longer focused on this. And I think that's crucial. And I think that's kind of the big part of the frustration in the community, because they're seeing these developments go up, and they have the understanding that they were approved recently, but in reality, they were approved 10 years ago. And there are no means to make that stop, unfortunately. But there isn't many projects left, which is good to know. But it's just about making them known. With that being said, that kind of second part, and I sort of trailed off from it, the Bridlegate projects like that, which haven't been fully completed and that have really been in the system for over 15 years, those are the ones that the city has to proactively stop, and the residents and council members have to understand and recognize, and be willing to oppose those. So, yeah, I hope that kind of clear. Does that clear up your question?
It clears it up for me.
Okay.
I was chomping at the bit on a follow-up question to that.
Okay.
And it sounds like, at least as of today, when a project is fully approved, there's no expiration date on it. And could be 15 years, and then all of a sudden, I don't know, let me think of something that we really wouldn't want here in Brentwood. Jimmy's Auto Dismantlers, a junkyard that was approved 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But now, for whatever reason, they decide to build on, and next, we have a wrecking yard on, Sand Creek and Brentwood Boulevard.
Sure,
So
sure.
The question is, can we put an expiration date on some of these projects? And if we can, would you, even if you're not mayor, would you push for something like that?
I'd absolutely push something like that. Now, I'm not fluent in contract law, so a lot of these things come down to very legal wording, legal jargon, that I don't think any of the candidates could really dissect for you. But with that being said, absolutely, I think a lot of these projects do need expiration dates, because they're coming back to haunt us, and you're seeing it now, and that's exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, and no, and that's fair enough. And again, contract law, all kinds of, and that's going to lead into another question in a second. But yes, I understand that, and I understand, okay, there's nothing we can do about these projects now. I would suspect that a lot of these projects were stalled because of the recession of 2009. And, that period of time when we were starving for anything to come in. And I have my opinion on that, but that is the way it is. But to have a project, let's say, like the project, let's go back to the wrecking yard. If Brentwood was starving for business and they thought, okay, well, we could put it next to the build out where Denny's is going to be now, and they approved that 8 years ago. Now we are on the road to what I think a lot of the original residents want it to be, which is a small town. But if this company has a lock, an open-ended lock on it, and money starts flowing in, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, Danny's Auto Records, yeah, I got this approved years ago, I'm putting it down, and our hands are tied. So again,
it is tough. Now, I think what's important to understand is how well the city has been planned. This is an incredibly well-connected city, 91 parks. From the beginning, we've done a very good job. And it's not until recently and that we saw this transition where we really do need to start transitioning, and then the planning can start to go downhill. I don't think there's anything in the works for a wrecking, and I know that's it's just a.
Oh, I'm using that as a. I don't think anyone would disagree that they don't want a wrecking yard.
Exactly, and so there aren't many projects that the city. There aren't many projects left in terms of what's been passed several years and years and years ago, and most of those are residential. I'm not familiar with any commercial projects that have been approved and haven't been developed on.
Okay, and I'll send you the link after this.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't want to eat up a lot of your time, but as I said, it was, and this is going to lead into the question in a minute, but it was something. It was on the back page. I was searching for. School, I was interviewing one of the candidates for the school board.
Sure.
And I really don't know any, after my kid graduated here in 2008, that was the end
Which
of
school?
my experience. Heritage. He was first year. He was the inaugural class.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah.
So
that's great.
Oh yeah, no, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
But that I didn't mean to go down a rabbit hole, but that's why I was doing research on schools. And it just happened to pop up. And it had the design, the layout, the whole shooting match. And I'm like,
interesting.
Yeah. That's a verb. That was the one that I was thinking of, but sure, that's a verb. And this is one of the things that, people in the city, in our city, I think are not aware of the dynamics behind the scenes. And again,
you're absolutely right. And I sorry to cut in, but I've said this quite a bit recently, and that is the city has to be more transparent going forward. You're getting close to a 70,000 person city now. Hopefully we're slow to that number, but exactly. But the city has to be more transparent. They have to be more educational, and they haven't been. People just aren't aware of what's coming next. And so if we're able to lay out exactly what's coming next and exactly where we're going, what do we want to do in the future? And I think they are starting to transition that way. You're starting to see the town hall and planning area 1 with the larger innovation center, which is an incredible opportunity for the city. So they're showing that they're prioritizing the higher wage jobs. They're prioritizing, they're prioritizing business. But at the same time, they have, I think they've lacked the chance to sort of educate the community on projects that are in the works that haven't been built on.
So. Right. Okay. No, fair enough. And please feel free to interrupt because I'm interviewing you. It's not Danny's diatribe. I do that enough. But with that in mind, and that's why I had to type it. I didn't want to forget this. Well, as you said, the city needs to be more transparent. Well, the city's nothing but a bunch of buildings. So how can you, when you're elected in office, how can you make this transparent? And I'll give you an extreme example, and I don't know if this is could happen, but what is to stop you as the mayor? Here are the meeting minutes. We're going to build this right here. We're planning on this right there. You just put out, here's what we're doing. Not the city council, not the city manager, not the local beat cop. Would that be something you would entertain as mayor? Because you are going to be the city of Brentwood.
Sure. No, absolutely. I think the mayor has a responsibility to be a little bit more visible and a little bit more out there in terms of putting out information. And so that's one way to do it. Does the mayor and his platforms have the opportunity to reach every resident? I'm not sure about that. And so I think there's an accountability that needs to be understood between the council and the staff. And I think the staff does a great job in a lot of ways. And being able to direct them towards those sort of opportunities. And so if you direct staff to begin forum discussions, to put out information and make it clearly visible, one of the biggest things the city, and I'll go on a little bit of a tangent, the website is awful. If you've ever gone to the City of Brentwood website, there are empty pages. You go to business incentives, it's empty. And so there's just a lot of things that could be cleaned up. But no, absolutely. I think, yeah, of course the mayor has a responsibility and can put all that out there. But the city has even a more influence in terms of reaching everyone.
Well, let me interrupt you for a second, because,
sure.
and this is something a lot of people say when they say the city. Well, the city is not a living, breathing thing. The city, from the standpoint of the manning of the ship, so to speak, that's you. That's the city council. That's the chief, depending on what it is the issue is. So
when I say city, I'm referring to staff.
Okay. All right. No,
Yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
And that's, but see, you see where I'm coming from, where
Sure.
I won't say you're saying it as a platitude, but it's easy for people to fall down that rabbit hole and to be honest, to sit there and say, oh, okay, yeah, the city, like the city has a great big B on it, and we're going to save the day. But that also that goes into when you had mentioned the outreach. Well, dude, Nextdoor is tailored. I'm not a big fan of it, but this is tailored for us. It is reaching out to us. And there are, quite a few people that utilize Nextdoor. So it is that town square. And I'm not trying to say that the outreach isn't out there. I am saying, well, have we tried every opportunity?
So staff is on, the city of Brentwood has a function on Nextdoor. Are they maximizing it? That's another question for another day. They do put out a lot of information, but of course, if you want, as I was saying, if we want to talk about future projects, future development, that's an avenue for it. But it's important to remember that not all residents are on social media. I know plenty of men and women, older men and women that, especially our larger senior community, that aren't really on Facebook, Nextdoor, any of those sort of platforms. And so it's important to do it in a lot of different ways. Nextdoor is just one more that they have to attack. Absolutely.
No, and again, you're right. Although there seems to be I won't say exponential growth, but people are starting to recognize Nextdoor as that town square. And I'm not saying that's the only recourse. Otherwise, all those big monster signs that will soon be going into the garbage dump illustrate, yes, there are multiple ways to get the word out. And I look at and hear, let me see if I can phrase this correctly. Yeah, you have a website. Pretty much everyone has a website. And so I don't know how difficult it would be to, maybe put up there any questions, go to Nextdoor. I think, for those who have Facebook sites that are using that platform to put information out, well, Facebook has 800 million. No, they have a lot. I want to say, I did the research on it once, but my point is that Facebook, not everyone's on Facebook. And yet it seems more there that the political aspect of it, of social media, seems to be targeted in that area. And I'm surprised.
So yeah, a little back on Nextdoor, one of my supporters posted something about myself in support of me and encourage people to donate. And after several, I think it was over a month, her post ended up getting taken down and she was suspended for the app for 3 days because you're not allowed to post political positions, and it really wasn't even political. It was
Right.
just to support for a person. And so Nextdoor doesn't really offer that opportunity for at least political candidates to get out there and talk about some of the issues in the city. With that being said, that doesn't stop the city of Brentwood, an agency that has a verified account on there to put out information.
Right. Oh, don't even. I have been on the wrong side of Nextdoor quite a few times, and
Okay.
And actually the last time was because I called Nextdoor out on their arbitrary policy of cutting people off.
Yeah.
They weren't too keen about that. And the thing is, and I don't know if you know anything about Nextdoor, but unlike Facebook, there are human beings that monitor, in addition to the algorithm, there are actual human beings that determine what stays, what goes, who gets the boot.
That's
and
good.
Local
Yeah.
residents.
Yeah.
Oh, that is, I understand that Nextdoor is a company, and it is, but it is a publicly traded company, first off. And second off, if they're going to arbitrarily and capriciously decide what's going to be seen, what's not going to be seen, who's going to be punished, who's not going to be punished, that's a story for another day. But believe me, we'll talk offline about Nextdoor if you have a moment to.
Sure. Yeah. So what are some of your other questions?
Okay. Well, let's go into it. Let's start we'll go back to, the development aspect of it with businesses. COVID, if it's done anything for us as a society, it is an equal opportunity destroyer. And we are losing businesses, not necessarily because there isn't any product that people wish to buy or interact with here, but COVID has pretty much wiped out small business, not pretty much, I'm sorry, but has started wiping out small businesses who can't, they're not getting paid, they're not earning an income, they are, and I'm just talking about your typical businesses. I won't even get into, the mom and pop,
Sure.
Rentals, things like that. But my point is that on the one hand, we have a homeless problem, and we have soon to be homeless. And then on the other side, we're building. So let's use, for the sake of argument, people lose 100 homes, these poor folks. And I've been on this edge, so I'm talking from experience. But people who wind up losing their homes, 100 homes, for example, but we're building 100 new homes. So, how do you sync up the rationale of building up new homes that may be empty because people can't afford it, and then our citizens are losing their homes? So we basically have 200 empty homes, but we're still building.
No, yeah. So absolutely, and once again, we talked about this previously. Some things it can't be stopped, but any new developments that are going in are simply foolish. They're not doing anything, productive. Any new residential developments that occurred in the last year or 2 years are not productive. They're simply your homeless issue. There are a lot of different things that you could go into and how they're unproductive or ineffective. But there's a few things to note about homeless, and they are increasing in Brentwood. Back in 2016, I believe, the city council had an opportunity to take money from the county, which received money from HUD, state HUD, and address the issue. Now, what the city had to do was declare a state of emergency for homelessness. At the time, we had about 34 homeless people. We didn't end up doing that, and now we're about 81 homeless people. And so or it was 2016 or 2018. And so there's something to sort of understand about the homeless issue. And Tim Ogden kind of explained this to me, which is a good description. So if you build a shelter, if you were to build a shelter, and you have 100 beds and you have 81 homeless people, you can kick every homeless off their bench and put them into a homeless shelter. Once your homeless exceeds the amount of beds in your shelter, then you can't force anyone off the bench. So if you have 101 homes, or you have 101 homeless people and 100 beds, then the homeless can be anywhere they would like, and you can't really do much about that.
Right.
And so, as you were saying, development is sort of, we're building and there's more homeless people, which might be a good and bad thing. The bad thing is if it's not affordable, and most developments aren't. I spoke to a county representative at the farmers market, and her name escapes me, but she talked about how the way to solve the homeless issue and shelters, and why I explained that was sort of why that's not the way to go, because there's sort of this repetitive, cycle of building and continuing to increase services, and we just can't sustain that. And so where she saw the opportunity is affordable housing, building more affordable housing, high density units, which we don't have a lot in Brentwood, and being able to offer those to the homeless, and giving them that opportunity, rather than give them a temporary solution. We give them a long-term option, by offering that affordable housing, by getting them back on their feet. And so right now, Brentwood doesn't have any service. It doesn't really have the means to do much. And so what's important for Brentwood is to offer them the services to get back on their feet, not offer them the service to be in a temporary stay or to live in a temporary shelter, but to get them back on their feet. And so that sort of takes a collaboration of sort of affordable housing. And that's something the city is missing, because it's not just homeless people, it's young people too. You have a lot of college students that leave Brentwood and never come back because they can't buy a $600 or $7,100 home, right out of college. And so there's sort of that life cycle housing that people talk about that we don't have, and that is affordable housing. And so Brentwood's never really been friendly, or really we do have a lot of high developer fees, and I respect the city for it. Mm-hmm. But we don't give anything to the little guys, the smaller developers that want to build more life cycle housing for us, for our teachers, for our students, for people getting back on their feet from homelessness. Right. So, and that is an opportunity I'd like to see Brentwood jump on, because we are transitioning from these larger units, these hundreds of homes, to sort of these smaller developers that could offer much more to the city and what the city actually needs, rather than more family units, more rooftops that aren't, it's not sustainable.
Right.
And I've talked about that in the past.
Okay, no problem. Now,
yeah.
And I asked this of one of the other folks I interviewed, and it has to do with the soon-to-be homeless. All right, the person who is 2 months behind on their mortgage, or even though right now there's a moratorium on booting people out, rentals and homes and things like that. Well, eventually that moratorium is going to end.
Exactly.
Now, and here's the question: would you consider, if you were mayor, looking into the city slush fund and basically carry the notes of qualified people, the way the Fed gave money, or the state gave money to businesses to keep themselves afloat? And the reason I ask that question is very, very, very few people who are on their last month before they're evicted are going to go out there and brag, hey, I'm going to be homeless in a minute. So we really don't know how many people are near homelessness. And you're talking about addressing homelessness, and that's fine, but that's one of those, barn door, horse gone, and where we could be proactive.
Sure.
And maybe a bridge loan, maybe a bond measure. And I don't know, I'm not running for mayor, so.
Sure.
But
by
something like that.
Sure. And by slush fund, you meant the reserves?
I don't know, I
Okay.
don't know what the technical term is,
Okay.
when Susie opens up the drawer and brings out the
Okay.
envelope.
I got you. I got you. So there's kind of a few things to consider with that. One, I think let's understand the demographic of Brentwood. This is a high wage earning community. Um, and while we do have an increasing homeless issue that we have to address, we don't have you know, a plague or some sort of, it's not exponential right now. We're not losing homeless. We're not a high density area like San Francisco or San Diego or LA. And so the it would the first thing we'd want to do is understand exactly where Brentwood's at, where residents are at. The majority of them have been able to keep their jobs and continue to go and pay their rent, pay their mortgages. On a national scale, that's a different discussion. There are a lot of different communities that are hurting. I think Brentwood's different in that way.
Well, let me interrupt you because
sure, go ahead.
And I understand, and I'm not going to prophesize where you were going down that, but
Sure.
yeah, I'm selfish. I'm talking about my
Everyone is.
and that's true. But I'm talking about my neighbor. I'm talking about, there are going to be people who are watching this, and they may think what you're spewing is just basically platitude. And I'm not saying you are. I am saying that there are people here now that are 1 month away from getting booted from their apartment, from their home, from their farms. And I'll get into the farm part of it in a minute. So it's easy to say, and again, now I'm going to talk from experience. And that's
Sure.
why when I hear the political speak, and with
Sure.
all due respect to you and the other candidates.
I was sort of setting it out because I wanted to talk about it. So go ahead. Continue.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Sure.
But,
I like to look things from a lot of different angles. That's the first thing you have to consider. Where's Brentwood?
Mhm.
Where's Brentwood at? Exactly how many people are at risk? From my research and what I've been able to gauge, I don't think there would be a high percentage. And
Right.
So that could be a good thing.
But
That could mean that the city.
Let me interrupt you. Even though, let's say it's 1%,
Sure.
when you're that person, it's 100%.
No, exactly. And so that's what I was getting to.
Okay.
If the lower the percentage is, the more feasibility the city has to offer those people, right? And so if we have just the entire a large percentage of the city, and the city can't afford it, what do? Do you bankrupt the city and try to help people for a few more months, and then everyone's in a bad position, or do you try to salvage the city in such a bad state? And so that's kind of what you have to understand is where we at. The lower the percentage, the more opportunity the city could offer. If it is that low percentage, if there are that smaller amount of people, then I think it's feasible for the city to at least look into the plan. And I can't make, and I don't want to make a decision if I don't understand the numbers. And so you have to understand exactly how much is the city going to lose, how much is this going to help, how much are you going to lose, right? So you can't make any kind of generalizations right now. You can't. I don't really like to talk about speculation because that's kind of what we are right now, and that's everything in COVID. We're always speculating, and that's hard. And so, but I'd absolutely be open to the idea, and it would be a great opportunity if the city could do it. But no, exactly. I was getting to the point where I would agree with you if the numbers line up. As long as the city doesn't fall into, you don't want to take down the ship
Right.
with you. You don't want everyone sink. Exactly.
No, and I understand that, and I think the people watching this understand that. There are only so many people you could fit in the lifeboat before the lifeboat sinks. Okay.
Yeah.
So that I understand, and I'm sure a lot of even the people who are trying to get in the lifeboat, I'm sure they understand that.
Because what ends up happening is the city can't even, and they can only help them for so long, and then the city's gone, and now they're gone too. So
right, the boat sinks.
Yeah.
And again, when you have a sinking ship, and I'm not using that as a metaphor for Brentwood.
No, I don't think it is. I mean, yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm talking to, believe me,
Sure.
somebody on next door will have a hard time. You know who you are.
Sure.
But, no, I think everybody understands that. But how the does that then jive with new buildings, new developments? And I'm talking about today, right now, not getting a small construction company in and doing stuff and affordable housing. I'm talking about there are four, I think, just from where I live, and I'm going to beep out Fairview and Sciartino, to Garin. There are at least four developments going on right now. So here go four new property, four new areas that's building up property. And then on the other hand, we have people who are losing their home. So how does that jive? How do you make, not you necessarily.
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to say you.
Yeah, no, it doesn't jive well in the city, and it's only happened recently, and that's why you're starting to realize it. But now I'll kind of give a backstory. The city has relied on developer fees for a very long time. It was what started the city. It's what made it great. But we're at a point where that's no longer sustainable, and you're starting to rezone commercial zones and residential ones because you're trying to get more developer fees. And so that's the reasoning behind it. That's why you're seeing these developments, because there is a pattern of the developer fees, and that's what we've done for a very long time. That's the status quo, and that's exactly what I'm not. I'm not the status quo, and so you're right. These residential developments are not what the city needs right now. Can we stop them? No, because they're going up right now. But it's that importance of realizing this is no longer what any of the residents want here. When you get a 70% of the residents voting no on a measure, that's resounding. It's loud, and so the city has to start to take notice of that, and prioritize that other avenue, that business, and the other aspects of Brentwood that have been ignored. So you're absolutely right.
No, I'm not trying to be right or wrong, and
Sure.
let's see if I could stop beating that dead horse for a minute.
Sure.
Because it kind of rolls into this discovery that I was talking about. The city manager, this is interesting. The city manager is not an elected position.
He's not.
And the city council, he works at the pleasure of the city council, but he has an awful lot of power. And this is, I don't know what you as mayor could do. I don't even know what you as citizen could do. I just, if anything, I want it to be known to you, if you didn't know, and others, how much power he actually has. And so if you wish to speak upon it, that would be great. If not, I understand.
Sure, no, I'm absolutely willing. So there's sort of two city systems. There's the weak mayor and the strong mayor. And when you have a weak mayor, that's also referring to the council. You have a council that hires the city manager and hires the city attorney. They approve all developments. The planning commission reviews them. They give a recommendation to the city council. So at the end of the day, large impacts to the city are going to the city council, and it's their responsibility at the end of the day. And so, but in a strong mayor position, that's when you see San Francisco. That's when you see Stockton. That's the larger cities. That's where the mayor has hiring and firing powers over the police chief, the city manager. He is sort of the head of the city in a major way in terms of actually directing day to day.
Right.
In our system, we have that power more reserved in terms of city functions to city staff, and it's sort of autonomous in that way, and the city manager. But his power once again is checked by the council. So if he were to be out of line, if he were to start going against the council's wishes, then he can be fired, and that's simply as that. And I think Tim Ogden's doing a great job. I don't want anyone to think that he should be fired.
No, and I'm
but
not,
and
yeah.
so
Yeah.
but there, at the end of the day, the council has the ultimate say, and there's 5 people that serve. It's not one person or a dictator, and so you have that accountability there. It's just making sure it's happening.
Fair enough. Now, this is more of the Danny Dorman venting,
Sure.
but again, I was surprised about how much, and I'll say power, yeah, you could be checked. You could have a council that, that you may serve at the pleasure of. However, it is a non-elected position, and it has, yeah, I won't, say he or she, but it has an awful lot of power. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying that right now, today, it's unchecked power, but I'll give you an example. And here's something I'm going to bring up with all the candidates.
Sure.
There is some type of provision where the city, the council, if there's a budget for a project that is over, and I'll say $1 million, I think it's more than that. But a project that's over $1 million has to be approved by the council. Okay.
Yeah, I believe it's in that ballpark. Yeah.
I used to be a project manager.
Okay.
In my previous, and I also used to be a stakeholder. And so for those who understand project management, the stakeholder is the one that pays the bills, and the project manager is the guy that tries to keep the bills down. But then you have the people that work in there. My point, I'm teeing this up for something under, and I'll use $100,000 as maybe 50. It's an arbitrary number I'm throwing out, but let's say the threshold is 50,000 before it has to go to the council for approval. Well, you can break up a $2 million project into 4 $50,000 projects, and the council never sees it. And I'm not saying this is the case right now, but it would be naive of people who are applying for what you're applying for, running for what you're running for, people who are running right now, to think that that's not possible, because it is very possible. And there's no oversight on that slush fund. None. And that's, again, surprise, surprise.
Well, the council, the council, that is their job, is an oversight in that position. And if someone were to start to go over the council's head like that, they would be fired. I think what's important to understand is this is a system that's used across the nation. It's
Let me stop.
Go ahead.
And I'm so sorry. I remember when I said I'm selfish.
No worries.
What happens in San Francisco, I really don't care about, and I think the people watching. I can see, that's why you won't see me talk to federal or someone that's running for a county type.
I just meant that it is the general evolution of a city to begin the way we are, and then you transition to what's called, when you reach about 100,000 residents, that's when you transition to a strong mayor and a different council type. And so it is just the general city practices across the state, across the nation that act like this. And so any city manager that were to do something like that, it is the council's responsibility to recognize some of those functions and some of those wrongdoings. And it would take the city staff is over, a couple hundred. It would take a multilateral support among many different people to get to deceive, to sort of create that deception, if that makes sense. So there are plenty of ways to make sure that doesn't happen. And if it does, that's when the person gets fired. And so, it's just important but you're right. It's naive to recognize that the manager could do something deceiving and mislead the city.
I'm sorry for interrupting you. I didn't mean the city manager. Okay, no, I'm not saying that. This is more of, I'm a developer. I'm Danny Dorman, and I want to push a $5 million project. I know I have to go see the council if it hits, I'll use an arbitrary number, $100,000. So I can break it down then into segments that are under 100,000 that just go under the radar. Now, I'm not saying that the city manager or anyone on what will soon be your side of the house is doing anything nefarious. What I am saying is that it seems that, that whole, we don't look at anything under a certain dollar amount. Now, I'm not expecting you or the city to, hey, $1.29 for a screwdriver when you can get it for 99 cents. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is there are ways to work around the council and work around the city. And again, I'm not, please don't sue me, construction people. I'm not pointing.
Sure, I think there's always loopholes. Of course, I mean that's government at its core,
No,
is loopholes. But when you're referring to a sort of a development like that, the developments, if you were to parcel it into the amounts where it couldn't be reviewed by the city council, you're talking about fragments that could end up making up dozens. I mean, literally dozens of parcels until you finally get to your original development. But those sort of things, I've never heard of anything like that happening. Not to mention that every single sort of planning development now, I couldn't name you a development that's under the provision where you could have it at sort of that parcel, what you're referring to. Um, at the end of the day, it would be recognized by you have the planning commission, you have the city council, you have the city staff. So there are three different agencies, three different groups of people that are all looking out for these kind of things. And nothing's like that has happened in the city. Doesn't mean it cannot. Of course, not everything can happen. That's something you have to recognize as an elected official or as a appointed official. But it's unlikely, I think.
well, and maybe this is where you being a little too thin may come into play.
Do you have an example?
Yeah, for the
Go ahead.
no, not for the city. I
Okay.
used to be a project manager for Chevron, and I ran multi-billion-dollar projects in addition to, like 150,000 for Chevron. That's tip money. But there was a certain threshold that it had to go to the sponsor, the person with the pocketbook. And so it was common practice to work just under the threshold. And so I know from experience that it can happen. And I also know that there are people who are supposed to do the check and do the balance. And I'm not saying that that isn't the case with us. I'm not accusing anyone. I'm just saying it
Sure.
would be extremely naive
Sure.
you think that it's not possible. So I guess the
No.
question now will roll into, when you are mayor, will you revisit how the decision on what has to go before the city council, and I'm assuming that as mayor you can participate in that. Again, I don't know, but
Yeah, you're reviewing a provision. Okay.
yeah,
You want
let's
to,
say
amend a
magic
provision.
Yeah.
Sure. You want to amend a provision. That would take a 5 vote, or not unanimous, but it has to take a 3-2 vote. It has to depend on maybe it's too high now and we can lower it. But it really depends on, does it hinder the daily functions of the city? Because here's the thing that happens a lot of time with oversight boards, and so I'm kind of drifting from council because they've always functioned a similar way in every city.
You're kind of low. Your voice is kind of dropping.
Okay, my apologies.
No problem.
Sir, a big problem with sort of checking every single thing is what you end up having is no autonomous functions of the city, and then government becomes even slower. One of the biggest complaints of residents and voters and elected officials is that everything is so slow. And so what you're risking there is for things to get even slower than that, and for the city really not to be able to make any decisions on their own, or the staff, I'm talking about the staff, really make any decisions on their own. But of course, I'm willing to look into it. I think it's important to look into it. But it's also important to look into exactly, what has been happening in Brentwood. Has this happened? Is there a large issue? And at the moment and in the last 20 years, I couldn't name one to you. And so that's sort of my perspective. But absolutely, everything takes consideration.
Okay, no, fair enough. And yeah, again, this is, and I was kind of sort of joking about the thin aspect of your pedigree.
It's okay.
Yeah, no. But my point is that, it is, I know from experience that it is possible, and you're right. You can't count every penny. You can't. But if it is in the interest of the the person trying to get the gig, okay. And actually, this is going to roll into the one time I met you, or not met you, but saw you when you came in and announced that you were running for mayor. I don't know if you heard the chuckles on the way back out, but I was like, hey, I, that's cool, you know.
Hey, it's okay. It's okay. We've had plenty of that, but we've had plenty of support too.
Yeah, no, and well, you should. And I think a lot of the people who are watching this won't hold your age against you. I mean, won't
Some
hold
do.
your body structure again. Man, ageism is see, there's ageism on both ends of the spectrum, dude. I'm on one end and you're on the other. So
yeah.
But all joking aside, it's not, and I'm not saying that you could not do the job because of your experience. That's why you surround yourself with a great team of people where they feel.
And I have, and I'm grateful for it.
Yeah. So that's why the age part of it is not really an issue for me, and I'm sure it's not really an issue for others. However, and this is going to now roll into when I talk about farming and growth in a second, but you have, well, let me back up. I came out to Brentwood. I was blessed. I was fortunate. I'm a poor kid from the projects in San Francisco, and I had my home built for me here in 2003.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I moved out here was I was told that this would not be some sprawling metropolis.
Yeah.
You know, so it was the developer was saying this, like that this was going to be more like an Alamo or Black Hawk, and not so much as a Concord. And that's with all due respect. Okay. And now, yes, growth is growth. However, this I'll call it sprawl. And I'm not going to say it's unchecked, but this is not the city that I thought I was going to die in, because this is my last house. And now it goes to the question about farmland. You have developers that will just sit there and throw money at farmers and farmland.
They throw money at everyone.
Oh yeah, they throw money at everyone. But you know, you have some. When I first moved here, there was a pig farm on Minnesota, and there was a horse stable around the corner from my house. I used to watch horses clamp down on Fairview. Now, yeah, that obviously hasn't happened in a long time. But my point is that there are farms over that are still there. My son just bought a house, and so I'm going to sound a little hypocritical now, but there's still farmland over in his area, in the Garin area. We have both sides of Highway 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those.
But how do you, or can you, or should you find a way to keep the farmland the farmland? You know, it's these people aren't just selling their land because they want to get out of the farming business. A lot of times it's tough times, and you know and this is going to be my only reference to outside of Brentwood, when monies were given to small businesses to keep themselves going, could or should you, and by you are the face of Brentwood, help keep some of these farmers farming? It's a two-part question, but I'll let you answer that one first.
Sure. So it's difficult now that there are funds to encourage and to help and market for agriculture in the community, but it's hard because the city isn't in lush with cash as many as people think. the state has the opportunity to do that. The federal company, the federal government has the opportunity to do that. But in terms of the city sustaining a farm for long term and subsidizing a farm, we could occur some challenges there. I think what's important to remember is the farms are dwindling. It's important for the city to preserve that and protect that as much as they can and in all their resources, that allow them to. But at the same time, it is their landowners and it's their decision. If they want to sell their land, then no one can stop them. But the city should and should help them in any way possible to protect their land and encourage them to continue to keep it. What's more of is sort of a long-term outlook for us is having those farms outside of the city, just outside of the city limits, continuing to bring it back into Brentwood in the form of the farmers market, other events, and bringing farm to table, that kind of thing. So that's how you preserve kind of that agricultural part in the city long term.
Okay. All right, fair enough. Let me, let's see, other questions. When it comes to the plan, they always say, we have the plan, we have the plan. Now, again, as a project manager, a plan without a goal is a wish. And we have a plan that always seems to be amended. After a while, that's called scope creep. After a while, the scope creep becomes so prevalent that the plan is meaningless, because it's like there's no goal. It's just a series of plans. So my question to you is, as mayor, your role is a little bit different than the council people I asked this question of, but as mayor, what can you do to have the decision makers stick to the plan?
And that comes down to connection. The mayor has no physical power or any legislative power, I guess you could say. I don't know if that's the right word, to dictate that sort of to dictate it one way. At the end of the day, it's 5 council members. The mayor has not a more powerful vote than any of the others. And so building those relationships with your council members, creating that connection and teamwork at the end of the day will allow you to preserve that long-term goal. Now, the city does have 10-year, 20-year goals, but what you're saying, and you're right, things continue to get changed every few years, and so that 10-year outlook looks different all the time. And so it is important to preserve it. And the thing that I can do is advocate on behalf of that, is preserve exactly what we're looking for. And I'm not sure what kind of answer you want, but
you're coming in low. No, the answer I want is, what are your thoughts? Again, if you had a magic wand, okay, and again, I know that it's not a unilateral decision by the mayor, but the mayor has an awful lot of influence with the voters, and that could be leverage. And and now this is where your age will come into play, I believe. There are a lot of youngsters. Dude, I'm 60, so 40 is a youngster to me.
Okay.
But there are a lot of youngsters who are like yourself, are looking at the body politic, probably more so than any other time. Yeah. And so the mayor, I believe, if he or she were to not target a specific group, but take advantage of the size of the gang behind you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I want to do. I want to mobilize the youth. I want to mobilize the young people in this city, because local politics are ignored all the time. And this is really where the change happens. It's where the action happens, and that's why I'm passionate about it. And I think they are continuing to mobilize, and hopefully that's what I'm able to do. But at the same time, I want people to understand that I'm not representing one group. I have a strong connection to the senior community. I have a strong connection to to New Brentwood, Old Brentwood. I mean, there's so many different parts of the community that's important to understand, that I won't be representing one group. With that being said, do I have a better opportunity to mobilize one or the other? Sure. But that doesn't mean that their interests are more important, if that makes sense.
No, that does
Yeah.
make sense.
And
More,
Danny, I do apologize, and I'm wondering if we could pick this up. I have an event at 2:30.
Sure, you could be my first part two. That's not a
Okay.
problem at all. That's
Okay,
not a problem at all.
we should do that. Yeah, I have an event scheduled for that, and then the cow high is gonna be there. It doesn't matter. But yeah, I do apologize. And I enjoyed our conversation, so I want to pick it up.
Okay, no, that's
Yeah.
great. You know, because there were a couple other questions that that the audience asked. So
Sure.
no,
I
let's
wanna answer
schedule a
those.
time. And
Yeah.
I understand you're busy, and that's good. If you weren't busy,
Yeah.
maybe you
Yeah.
wouldn't be the right choice. So thank you, and
Yeah.
I look forward to part two
Yeah.
of this.
Yeah, I'll make sure to call you. We'll set something up again. Okay.
Great.
All
That
right.
sounds great.
You have a good one,
Thank
Danny.
you very much, dude.
Yeah, I appreciate it.